Hi everyone. The Shiur this week will be on Parshas Yisro. I believe the theme of Parshas Yisro is happiness and positivity. And in order to get into it, I'm going to provide some context. Basically what happens in this week's Torah portion is that it says at the very beginning that Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, hears all the great things, the wonders that the Jews experienced as they left Egypt and escaped into the desert. And Rashi tells us that it was specifically that he heard about the war with Amalek, how Moshe stood with his hands raised and they defeated Amalek. And he also heard about the splitting of the sea, this miraculous, event that shook the whole world, that everyone heard about. It says that Yisro then advised Moshe on appointing leaders and judges, because he saw in the camp that Moshe was standing and judging case after case all day long, helping the people, guiding them with halachic, ideas and halachic decision making. And Yisro told him, you can't do this. You can't be the only person that's giving the laws every day. And he told him that you need to appoint judges and leaders, people to come and help you to do this. And that's exactly what he does. He appoints judges, and then Yisro leaves and he goes back home. It says that Israel camps at the end of the portion, that Israel camps at Mount Sinai as one man with one heart, which is a reflection of what we saw, that the Egyptians chase after the Jews as one man with one heart, meaning they were all unified in their hate for the Jews. But here it's reflecting it back and saying that the Jews camped in a way of unity, as one man with one heart, as though they were all unified and ready to receive the Torah together. And it says at this point that they're called a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests. And we'll get into that. This is really one of the main reasons why I think the theme is happiness and positivity. At this point, God descends upon Mount Sinai in this grand epic display of thunder and lightning, and he gives us the 10 Commandments. So why do I think that the theme is happiness and positivity? Is mainly rooted in this very special phrase that we are called a mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests. If you've learned Kabbalah before, you know that the three distinctions of the Jewish classes, the Kohanim, Leviim, and the Yisraelim, the Israels, the three distinctions represent Chesed, which is kindness, Gevura, which is severity, and Tiferet, which is the middle, it's harmony, it's peace. And by calling us a nation of Kohanim, Hashem is saying that you guys are a nation of kindness. You're a nation of, rachmanis, of givers, of kindness, chesed. And it says that we were camped as one man with one heart to express this unity, to express this kindness that we had. And I believe that Moshe shows us this idea in this chapter, that happiness is really a hishtadlut. So this is the first lesson that I want to say, is that happiness is a hishtadlut, meaning that we need to work at it. It's something that we don't just let it come to us, it's something that we need to make happen. And I get it from this pasuk in chapter 18, it's verses 8 and 9. Chapter 18, verses 8 and 9, it says, Moshe told his father-in-law about all that Hashem had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians on account of Israel, and about all the hardships that had befallen them on the way, and that Hashem had saved them. And in response, it says that Yisro was happy about all the good that Hashem had done for Israel, that he had rescued them from the hands of the Egyptians. What you'll notice in this pasuk, in these psukim, is that Moshe starts with the punishments to Pharaoh and the hardships they went through. And Yisro's response starts with happiness and good, all the happiness and good that Hashem did to him. And so we learn a very important lesson about focusing on the positive, that it takes a lot of practice to be able to focus on the positive. But when you do it, it really enriches your life and the life of those around you. And I could be coming from this place of, if you ever saw The Prince of Egypt, the old Disney movie, Yisro is portrayed as this very happy, jovial, man with his daughters, and he hugs Moshe, and he's just so happy. And maybe that's the kind of perspective I have of him, but I see it reflected in the psukim as well, that he really starts with the happiness. Happiness is what he saw, and unity is what he strived for. The sages teach us that the righteous rejoice in their suffering. And I believe this doesn't mean that they enjoy suffering, God forbid, but it's more like a coping mechanism. To give a good example, there's many stories of different Hasidic masters, but the ones that come to mind for me are the stories of Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech of Lejinsk, the Holy Brothers. And there's a story that Reb Zusha and Elimelech were known to travel around the countryside, through different cities and towns, and they would be dressed like paupers, simple beggars, when in reality they were great tzaddikim. And on one occasion, they were traveling around and they got arrested. And they got thrown into this prison with all these other inmates. And inside this prison was a bucket that they used as their latrine, their bathroom. And it was a gross, disgusting bucket that they never cleaned, and it stank up the whole place. And Reb Zusha started crying. So his brother Elimelech asked him, what's wrong, Reb Zusha? What's going on? And he said, I long to pray to Hashem, and I understand that Hashem sends me everywhere, but by standing here with this disgusting thing in front of me, I'm not allowed to pray. And so what am I supposed to do? And Reb Elimelech says, but my brother, don't you see? The avoda, the thing that Hashem wants us to do right now, is specifically not to pray. This bucket being here means that Hashem simply wants us not to pray, and by not praying, we're doing His will. And Reb Zusha was so overjoyed, so happy with this clarity his brother had provided him, that he grabbed his brother and they started dancing. So one of the prison guards walks by and he sees these two Jews dancing. So he pulls one of the inmates over and says, what's going on? Why are they so happy? And the inmate says, honestly, I don't know. They're just dancing over there and they seem to be very happy about this bucket. So the prison guard says, okay, I'll show them. And he walks in, takes a bucket and takes it out. And then Reb Zusha gets even more happy. He says, oh, Baruch Hashem, now we can pray. So the moral that I believe is of this story is that sometimes we need to strive to see the positive in the world. And when we see the positive, we'll bring out that in the world. The world is a reflection of our inner world. So if I can see the positive out there, it will reflect back to me. And this is one of the great stories of Reb Zusha and Elimelech of Lejinsk. I also have my own personal story, which was one time I was in Crown Heights and I saw a friend of mine and I knew he was very sick. And so I asked him, how are you feeling? What's going on? How are you doing now? And he said, I'm happy that I'm sick now and not later, because now is the best time to be sick. And he said, I'm also happy it's just a cold and not something worse. I said, yeah, you're right, Baruch Hashem. Eventually he got better. And so I asked him, how are you doing now? And he said, Tal, thank God, life is such a gift. You only realize how good you have it when you're sick and get better. And I said, you're so right. You're right again. We only cherish the things we have when, God forbid, we lose them. And I hope for all of us that we don't have to get to that place that we'll cherish them only once we lose them. That every day we can wake up and we can realize, wow, it is such a beracha that I woke up today. That I have all my limbs, that I have clothes, that I have a family. It's such a blessing. Everything we have is a huge blessing, and we don't need to lose them in order to appreciate them. So my first lesson, or the first idea that I really wanted to bring home, is that we need to become accustomed to searching and seeing the good in the world. Because the more we accustom ourselves to seeing it, the more it will become the first thing that comes to mind. You won't have to try it so hard in order to see it. It won't be such a hishtadlut. You'd be able to see it immediately. And that's something that in this story Reb Elimelech was able to do. He saw immediately, no, this is all for the good. Everything's okay, we're serving Hashem. And that made them happy. So you must seek out the good until it's the only thing you see. The second idea that I feel was represented in this pasuk, or in the story of Yisro, is about judgment. We know that Moshe tried to do all the judging himself. He wanted to judge every case and to guide all the people. He felt he was the lawgiver, and that's what he's called even. But Yisro said, no, if you do this, you're going to burn out. And a simple Google search will reveal that burnout leads to cynicism, poor productivity, and resentfulness. And I know as someone that, studied at seemingly higher education in the US, no longer so high, and studied psychology, that this is very true. Burnout can not only lead to cynicism, poor productivity, and resentfulness, but if a person starts on that path, it can lead to much worse. And so it's important that in order to combat this, we delegate. We reach out to people for help. And this is something that I personally am not so good at, but it's something I'm working on. That you need to ask for help, and it's not a weakness. It means that you're able to share with others, because when you ask of them something, they're able to give you something. And delegating helps us to establish our relationships and doesn't allow for resentment, which is one of the biggest predictors of divorce in marriages. That's a little note from my wife that I learned. It's so important in relationships, especially, that you delegate roles. I know it's not such a thing these days with the woke mentality, but in Yiddishkeit we have roles. And even if you delegate different things, it's important that you act together as a team and delegate roles. I and my family am the provider. I go to work and I provide parnas, and that's what it is. My wife takes care of the kids. That's what her role is. And by establishing these things, we learn to appreciate each other, not resent each other, and to live happily, thank God. The final idea is something expressed at the story of Mount Sinai. When the Jews are standing at Mount Sinai, ready to receive the Torah, it says time and time again, I think twice talks about boundaries, establishing boundaries around the mountain. And I think 3 times it says they must prepare for this day to come. And finally we say, okay, we shall do it. We shall do it all. In chapter 19, verse 8, we shall do it. And I found this little segment to be incredibly powerful. We know, especially when it comes to raising kids, that we need to establish boundaries. But it's not just with kids, it's also with ourselves. If we ever want to be happy, we need to establish boundaries. There's a famous line I heard from my wife, I've heard from my father-in-law as well. Jews don't keep Shabbos, Shabbos keeps the Jews. We've been given a huge set of laws, of halacha, rabbinical, laws, as well as biblical laws that provide boundaries to our life. And if we don't have boundaries, we can see, even in society today, what happens. People go off the derech completely. They switch. They think, I have no boundaries. I can be a man, I can be a woman, I can be whatever I want. The world is open to me. But that's not freedom. Freedom is having the limitations and working within it. We even know, I studied this in a creative class in university, that one of the ways that creativity is heightened is under constraint. So if you have a job to do, but I constrain your resources, you will become creative and you will find a new solution, something that will change the game completely. And this is really one of the biggest ways that most of us experience creativity. It's under our boundaries that we're able to become the most actualized. After boundaries, we see this repetition of preparing. And there's a famous line again, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. A person who doesn't prepare for something is really preparing to fail. Even I'm sitting here with my, Shiur from last year written down, and I read it over 3 times in order to prepare for this. And still it's not good enough. I should prepare even more. But the point is that not preparing is preparing to fail. When you put in the time, you will really reap the rewards. I learned something a long time ago in psychology, that therapists schedule walks in between their sessions. And this is to help them clear their minds, because all day they're taking on the loads of other people. And in order to prepare for the next, session, they have to go take a walk and clear their mind so that they could come back refreshed. All of us are preparing constantly, preparing for the next day, preparing for the next meeting, preparing for the next project. And it's important that we do this. And sometimes we need to prepare by taking a break. All of this will help enrich our lives and help us live happily. And the final thing, if you're struggling with the first 2, the final thing is to do as Nike says, just do it. Sometimes to be happy or positive means just make a decision to do it. Just decide, today, I'm going to choose to be happy. It's something beautiful my father-in-law says to his son. He's 10 years old. And every day when my father-in-law drops him off at school, he says, choose to be happy. It's a powerful, powerful line. I tell myself it as well throughout the day. You need to sometimes choose to be happy. At the end of the day, God gives us free choice. And it's our ability to choose what we want to do and how we want to feel, down to every little bit. So those are the main ideas. The first one is that we must focus on the positive until it becomes our second nature. Then we must exercise our judgment. We must know to delegate and to reach out to people for help. We must also then establish boundaries for our own lives and those that we love. We must prepare for all these different things that we have in our life, prepare so that we can make our life easier and happier. And finally, just do it. If at the end of the day you have nothing else, just tell yourself, from now on, I'm doing tshuva, I'm a new person, I'm going to be happy. I want to end off with a story that I read and I found incredibly profound. It's a story of this man that was born here in Israel, and it was actually written in the newspaper. It was written in I think the Israel Times or something like that. But this man says that he was born here in Israel. I'll say it from his perspective. I was born in a non-religious family. In fact, they were complete atheists. The only religion that we had in our family was that of the IDF, of protecting the state of Israel. And due to the great attacks that I witnessed in Israel on the Orthodox community, I thought this is clearly not the way. People hate the Orthodox so much that clearly they haven't discovered the truth. But when I started seeking out the truth, I did as many Israelis do, and I went to the east. And I traveled from place to place until I reached the house of the Dalai Lama. And when I found the Dalai Lama, I was fascinated by him, fascinated by his personality, his spiritual ability, and I came every day to hear his sermons. It was at 4:30 in the morning. I found him to be an incredibly intelligent and cultured man, and I saw no fault in him whatsoever. When I was introduced to him, I told him that I decided to become one of his followers, to join his religion, and I asked if he was willing to accept me. In English, he asked me where I came from, and I told him that I come from Israel. He asked me if I was Jewish, to which I told him, yes, I am. And he reacted in such a strange way. His smiling face became pensive, even slightly threatening. And he told me that he didn't understand my approach at all, that I could not do that. He told me that all religions are trying to imitate Judaism, and that I was living in Israel with my eyes closed. He said, and I'll never forget this expression, he said that I must go back to Israel and open my eyes, that no one can prefer the copy to the original. And so he sent me back with a wave of his hand. That day, I couldn't think of anything else. I thought, he's right. I'm an Israeli, and I don't know anything about my own religion. So I had to travel around the world so much, only to hear from a spiritual non-Jewish leader that I was blind, and had gone all the way around the world to find out what I was holding in my own hand. So I returned to Israel, and I enlisted in yeshiva. I found that the Dalai Lama was right. Judaism is intensely present throughout all aspects of your life. It rules and limits and has many, many reasons to live. There are at least 613, the 613 mitzvot, that guide the way I tie my shoes, to the way I wake up in the morning, to just thanking Hashem for everything that I have. About 2 years after doing tshuva, after coming back to Judaism, I was after a shidduch, a match, and I accepted it. It was then that I met a girl of my age who had also done tshuva, also having sought life in India, and I don't know where else, but we discovered each other. And we found that we both had the same doubts and the same disappointments in life, the same search for meaning, and the same return to our source. And after a few meetings, I informed the shadchanit, the matchmaker, that I was ready to close the affair, and we got engaged. Immediately after the engagement, I turned to the shadchanit because I wanted to pay her, which is very customary. And she replied, I don't deserve it. I said, what do you mean? Of course you do. She said, your fiance actually came to me with your name on a piece of paper and asked me to get involved. Even before I had time to answer anything, she continued, I have not told you yet that towards the end of my search in India, I arrived at the Dalai Lama's house. This is his fiance speaking. She said that he impressed me so much that I wanted to follow his path. And when he met me, he told me that as a Jew, I should not trade gold for money, that I had to get back in touch with my own roots. He spoke quietly with one of his attendants, his secretaries, and they left for a few minutes and came back with a piece of paper. The Dalai Lama copied down a person's name on a piece of paper, handed it to me, and said, here you go. This is your soulmate. With this, his wife came back to Israel and went to a boarding school for young girls that were doing tshuva. She found that her course was easy and fast, and it was as if she was discovering the light, initially upon the advice of the Dalai Lama, but then it was much more intense light that attracted her. It was after a year that I decided to go looking for you, she said. I addressed many shadchanim with your name, but none of them could find you in the different yeshivot. It was through a friend that I found you. From the first meeting, I realized that the Dalai Lama was a professional shadchan. He understood exactly what I was looking for, and he wrote your name on this paper. That is our story. It seems very special to me, and we've been married at the time of this writing for 10 years. A few years ago, the Dalai Lama came to Israel, and I really wanted to meet him. I said I wanted to go and show him my gratitude, but my wife said that she thinks he'd rather that we not do that. And I looked at her and I knew she was right. After the Dalai Lama left, I went to see my rabbi and I asked him what was allowed or forbidden, if it would be okay for me to even go and see him. And he told me that as a man, I must feel grateful to him and consider him as righteous among the nations, but not more than that. Besides, he himself would not want more. Otherwise, he would have left my wife and myself to elect him as our spiritual guide. But he has sent us back to the heart of our roots. I, to this day, remember the words of my Rav, to remember him as a man and forget him as the Dalai Lama, which is not good for me. So, to recap some of the general ideas that we expressed in the Shiur, is that happiness is a hishtadlut. It's something we need to constantly work at. And if we work at it enough, it will become our second nature, and it'll be the first thing we see. We must also focus on our judgment, to allow others to help us in order to fight burnout and to fight resentment, which is very crucial. This will make our lives better, it will make us happier and more content. Finally, we need to have boundaries, to follow the mitzvot. We need to prepare each of our days for a good life, prepare so that we'll be happy. And at the end of the day, just do it. Just be happy. Finally, the story that I wanted to share, or that I did share, of the spiritual leaders of the world, that even they know that we have an eternal and infinite treasure. The question is, do we know that?